to do that. But I mean, are those kind of services? I mean, you talked about kind of democratizing it, but are those kind of services, if I'm a CTO of a small organization, or maybe not CTO, just the guy who's doing IT,
Mm-hmm.
are they affordable? I mean, are they the kind of things that people realistically can take on?
Yes, absolutely. And that's the whole point.
I mean, you would say that, of course.
I would say that. But that's kind of the point. I mean, everybody benefits from the economies of scale in a way that if you were going to go out there and employ a whole bunch of people to do this, you've got the wage bill associated with that. That isn't the case because we handle all the HR problems, including things like sickness, holidays, all that sort of stuff, it's not your headache, then it becomes our problem. And as I say, we use economies of scale to make it as affordable as it can be. I mean, realistically, of course, our service is more expensive than just buying product, but then it's doing so much more. It's covering those gaps. It's highlighting where, you may have something going on the network, which is maybe just slightly under the radar. A cyber criminal penetrating the organization and stealing your data is not a virus. It's not malware. It is unlikely to trigger off some kind of alert. But it's a significant problem. And the only real way to spot that is by looking at what's going on in the estate. And that's exactly what we offer as a service. And augmenting the organization's existing capabilities. So it's important that we emphasize to our viewers that we're not looking to do anybody out of a job. This is very much, or can be very much, a collaborative approach. If you've got skill sets available, we will cover the time when they're not available. And the cyber criminals love targeting out of hours. If you've got sick leave or whatever the situation might be, we augment those capabilities. We're not looking to do anybody out of a job, and we're not delving into the world of day-to-day IT admin either. So if you've got a bunch of really good IT people, that's fab, and they can go off and be the best IT department in the world because all of a sudden we're not expecting them to deal with cybersecurity, which isn't their forte. It's a completely different. Yes, it's IT, but cybersecurity is a completely different discipline. It's a completely different set of skills, and to do it properly, you're probably not worrying about resetting the password from some user that's forgotten it. You're not worried about changing the toner in the printer and all those other day-to-day IT jobs. So we can free up IT departments to be better at what they should be doing, and then cybersecurity, to a large extent, becomes our problem.
Yeah, and I think that resource thing's a real challenge, isn't it? Because that obviously can be a real challenge. You talked before, if you're an SMB, you maybe got 50 people, you are unlikely to. You might have some dedicated IT people, but you're unlikely to have a dedicated cybersecurity professional because you probably just can't afford them.
No, absolutely, and it's really hard to retain them as well. So because the job market is so dynamic, we frequently see where you've got a cybersecurity analyst and they'll leave and go and work somewhere else for sometimes, even without exaggeration, double money because people are so desperate and they're tripping over themselves to get this talent. And again, that becomes our problem at Sophos if you go down this route of outsourcing the human-led threat hunting side of things.
I think interestingly as well, it's so you can see it kind of being really attractive as a service for small businesses. But actually, if I'm CTO of a large enterprise, and I have this conversation quite a lot with people who are looking after really big estates, and they still have the very same challenge. They've either got way too many tools that they just can't keep an eye on, or they just don't have enough expertise. Because actually, you talked about things like they're resetting account passwords, they're fixing printers, they're looking after servers, they're dealing with big complex infrastructure. And actually, even then, they either don't have the tools kind of aggregated together well enough to give them this overall view, or they just don't have the resources. So I guess it's kind of a service that those kind of services will scale. So without trying to sound like an MDR sales pitch here, but it's a real problem that we see. And actually, more and more, it feels like more and more of security. And more security vendors are offering, not just in terms of MDR, but other managed services, because actually the challenge is just getting too big for organizations of pretty much any type to be able to deal with.
Absolutely, yeah. When you start to gravitate up to the bigger organizations that you've alluded to there, we tend to find that where there are security teams, they're often playing a game that I like to call alert whack-a-mole, right? Because they've got so many dashboards, so many screens, and they're all vying for attention and screaming to say, you've got this problem, that challenge. And the problem is that often they're busy looking at those alerts and maybe dismissing them in certain circumstances, but not really doing anything particularly effective. So in those kind of circumstances, our MDR desk can take a slightly different view. And instead of actually rolling up our sleeves and dealing with the problem, we can collaboratively work with the end user. And we could very quickly go to them because of the way that we use a combination of artificial intelligence plus human being, we can then go to that particular user and say, hey, we can see you have a problem. This is the machine that has the problem. This is what the problem is. And this is what you need to do to go and fix it. So instead of them having to wade through pages and pages of telemetry and figure out what's going on for themselves, which will typically take quite a long time, we are very quickly getting to the point where we've investigated the incident and told them what they need to go and do, and they can go and do it very quickly and very effectively. So we can even take an existing security operations center and we can make them sharper by doing all of that analysis and getting to the root of the problem as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think it's an important part of this, isn't it? Because I think in terms of all security, no organisations today want to have invested in things and then talk to a Sophos, and Sophos come along and say, "We'll throw all of that out and put this in." This is all about not just augmenting people, but actually there's lots of gaps here to augment technology investment. So it's not, if you don't have Sophos everywhere, this doesn't work. This is much more about kind of integrating with lots of other capabilities.
I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, yeah, because one of the initial assumptions when we start talking about the service is that the end users, they will assume that we then have to start ripping away the existing endpoint protection, ripping away the existing firewalls, and that isn't necessarily the case. You're absolutely right. So the Sophos MDR service is available for a wide variety of different cybersecurity vendors. So you don't actually have to have anything from Sophos necessarily to benefit from the service. So if you've already invested in some other solution, then as long as there's an integration built, which in many cases there are, we can take the telemetry from your existing cybersecurity investments and then make it better with the service that we offer. And that's really important right now because obviously we know what the economic situation is. The appetite for nullifying investments and replacing them with other things probably isn't there. The appetite for disruption to the business isn't there. So what we can do is actually give our users a better return on investment for the things they've already bought. Because if you've gone out and bought a firewall from another vendor and you're not looking at the alerts and the logs and whatever, you're probably not really getting the best out of the product. So by wrapping the service around it, all of a sudden you're getting better ROI on the things that you've already invested in. Yeah. And of course, we would love people to have Sophos from front to back, but that isn't the reality. People, they know tools, they've bought things, they have a vested interest in other solutions, and we just embrace that and work with them.
Yeah, and I think what's important for people to realise, if you're a CTO watching this and think, well, this is great, see, John, you work for Sophos, so that you're here to talk about kind of some of the things that Sophos are seeing and in terms of MDR, what they're doing. But I think refreshingly as well, that is kind of a trend from your competitors as well. I'm not aware of, some do this better than others, of course, but I'm not aware of any MDR vendor who's now today saying necessarily you have to rip out all of the stuff that you've got. I think that certainly the trend tends to be towards, we understand that we're going to have to integrate with, particularly in larger organizations, we're going to have to integrate with existing technology or else this is just never going to work. So I think it's a refreshing thing for a CTO. So I think if you're concerned about resourcing, managed services it's certainly something that's worth exploring, because I think for a relatively low cost, for a huge benefit, it's an interesting area.